Hello, 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 and happy Halloween, everyone. So, yeah, first off, I know it's been a while since I've made an episode review. I haven't had very much inspiration lately. But with it being October and Halloween being today, I figured, hey, I'll just make a new one. And why not review my personal favorite episode of the show? And I say this because it's horror related. And FYI, if anybody remembers my review of The Big Squeeze, you'll know that I am a big fan of horror. I pretty much grew up with horror. As you can see by my shirt here, I am a fan of The Walking Dead. They even have both seasons on DVD. Then again, I'm not here to brag about my DVD collection. No. What I'm here to talk about is this episode that I love. Sorry. I'm talking about the episode simply known as I Was a Penguin Zombie. Yes, folks, that is my favorite episode of the show. You're probably wondering why. Well, for one thing, it does play on the whole zombie thing, and the title alone is a play on 50s B horror movies, which I have to say are pretty interesting to watch in their own right. I think it depends which ones you watch. That's neither here or there. So, since I'm also a big fan of zombie films, I've watched almost every one ever made, good and bad. So anyway, let's get started with this episode. It pretty much begins with the guys, fishing for condiments from a hot dog stand, and it ends with Skipper falling out of the tree and breaking his wing. He tries to pass it off as a little sprain, make it look like it's nothing, until Alice catches him and takes him to the vet. The doctor applies some ointment to it to make it feel better, representing gauze or whatever the stuff is. I don't know, I didn't really pay attention to what he said. And the guys come around to see if Skipper's alright, and once you know it, the TV is playing, and they hear a soap opera that they think is really the doctor talking about Skipper's condition. So they assume the worst. As it turns out, Skipper's just fine. He's just got a hurt wing, and it's even wrapped up nicely. So he tries to go back to the guys, but instead he gets covered in powder to make him look pale. He's wrapped in more gauze, which, to be honest, makes him look more like a mummy rather than a zombie. To be honest, the actual premise of the movie, the stuff that goes on in it, reminds me more of a Hammer Studios mummy film. Which one? Take your pick. There's several to choose from. So anyway, Skipper gets back to his men, and they automatically assume he's a zombie. He's a zombie. Sorry, you got a little sinus blockage in my head right now. So, one thing I like that this episode does is that it plays on several horror cliches, such as jump scares, which, to be honest, are pretty good if done right. Not like that Nightmare on Elm Street remake, in which pretty much every scare in the movie is a jump scare, rather than a scene to terrify you. And yes, there is a difference between jump scares and terrify. Jump scares scare you for a second. Terrifying means you're just coming at them slowly, and it's very scary that way. And I worked in a haunted house this past October, so I know that, and they taught us the difference between a jump scare and terrifying your victims. So anyway, where was I? Oh yeah. Also, hiding in the dark, and of course, my personal favorite, suspense, where they're in the trash can trying to hide from the zombie skipper, whichever you prefer to call it. And Kowalski's just yelling. He's just looking around in different directions, screaming. And right when they don't expect it, zombie skipper pops up, Jason to the Rooftop, where here they play a more cliche, stating that, you know, zombies like to eat brains, which really I've only seen in a handful of zombie films. Mostly the Return of the Dead series. Also a pretty good movie. First one, second one's okay. Everything else after that, So anyway, it's there at the rooftop that Skipper finally reveals exactly what's wrong. Again, kind of playing on Return of the Dead, where zombies can talk quite perfectly, despite being dead for a long time. Again, that's what makes that movie so good. It's both funny and scary. Kind of like this episode. And it ends with the guys not falling for Skipper's words, and them going over, pretty much going off the roof. The episode ends with them all in the hospital, kind of showing that zombie viruses is kind of contagious. It is pretty contagious. You know, get scratched, get bit, next thing you know, boom, you're a zombie. After you die a slow and painful death from the disease. So, yeah, that pretty much wraps up the episode. Not really much to say about the episode. But what I can say is that I just love how it plays on horror film cliches. And again, with me being a horror fanatic, I appreciate a lot of these cliches. You know, jump scares, the fear of the dark, and suspense. 3 factors I just love in horror films. That's how you do horror properly, is when you have all 3. To do a horror comedy properly, you gotta you pretty much have to play on the 3 standard cliches. Sorry if I'm stuttering, guys. Again, blockage in my head, sinus drainage, it makes you feel miserable. So that about wraps up this review and this episode. So I just want to say, hope you guys have enjoyed it. Hope to see you soon with another review. And remember, have a safe and happy Halloween.